You may have noticed during note input that when you input a note, the note remains selected or colored blue until you input another note or rest. When a note is selected, you can edit it in a variety of ways. The following editing possibilities apply to notes immediately after you input them. To experiment with these capabilities, go ahead and input a note first. I'm going to grab a quarter note and input it here on my score. And then once you've inputted that note, with it still selected and the input caret to its right, you can do a number of things. First, you can use your up arrow or down arrow to move the note up or down diatonically. You can also use Command arrow up on Mac or Control arrow up on Windows to move the note up by an octave, or Command arrow down on Mac or Control arrow down on Windows to move the note down by an octave. You can also use your Enter key or Return key on the QWERTY keyboard to respell the pitch and harmonically. So I can change this C very quickly into a B sharp, and that toggles back and forth, so I can just hit Return or Enter again to get it back to C. All of those features are editing possibilities you've probably already become aware of. You just need to remember that you can apply these processes immediately after you input a note. What you may not already know is that with a note inputted and selected like this, you can also add additional notes to it to create intervals or chords. And there are a few ways you can add intervals to a note immediately after you input it. First, to input another note on the page with your mouse, you can simply just hover over the recently inputted note, find a pitch that you'd like to add to that note, and click. And that adds that interval in there. And you can add from there, either above or below the note. You can also use shortcuts to do this. So go ahead and input another note, move your mouse away, and you can use the QWERTY numbers 1 through 9 to add the intervals unisons through ninths above the inputted or selected note. So with that C selected, if I press the number 3 on my QWERTY keyboard, I get a third above the note. If I press 3 again, I get a third above the E, which is a G. And you can also do the opposite of this by using that theme that we have, Shift does the opposite. So if I input another C here, if I need a fourth below the C, instead of pressing 4, I'm going to hold Shift first to do the opposite, and then press 4. Shift 3 gives me the third below the G. Pay attention to the fact that as you add additional intervals to notes, the new note becomes the selected note, and thus the note that you're adding the interval to. So to create a triad, let's say from this C here, the shortcut is 3, 3, and not 3, 5. So I'm trying to transition you right now away from using your mouse to using shortcuts. That said, you can also add intervals the slow way from the ribbon. If you go to the Note Input tab, over to the Intervals group, you can add an interval above or below any selected note. Again, that's a very slow way of working. I don't recommend it, but you can add intervals to notes from the ribbon if you prefer. Next, we're going to discuss adding accidentals and articulations after you input a note. If you're going to add accidentals or articulations to notes during note input, you already know that you have to add them before you input the note. So if I want a flat B that's accented, I have to choose the flat and the accent and then input the pitch B. If you need to go back and add an accidental or articulation to a note that was previously inputted, you can't do that right away. So if I input, let's say I toggle off my accent and I input a C, and let's say that I want that to be a sharp C with a staccato. If I choose the sharp and the staccato, I'm not affecting the note that I just inputted. I'm loading my mouse for the next note. So in order to add an accidental or articulation to the previous note that you inputted, you have to actually exit out of note input by pressing Escape, but only press it once. That note that you just inputted will remain selected. The input caret will go away, and you're basically in edit mode getting ready to edit that note that's selected. Then you can click on the accidental or articulation in the keypad. Let's choose a flat and a staccato, and it will add it to that selected note. And you can escape again to deselect the note. So you can actually go back to any note in the score and edit in an accidental or articulation. I can select any of these notes. If you remember non-contiguous selection, holding Command, and I can add accents to any of those notes and escape. To get back into note input after you've done any editing, for now, just go ahead and escape, choose a duration in the keypad, hover over a rest or a position in a bar, and input your pitch. So this has been a very brief introduction to note editing. You can always escape out of note input and select any notes in your score that you'd like to edit and add articulations or accidentals to them at any time.